Sky News Studios in Melbourne, live. The Bolt Report. Now, Andrew Bolt.
Welcome to the show, and it's a packed one. I'll be talking, for instance, to Douglas Murray, author of The Strange Death of Europe, out here on a speaking tour. Plus, there's Barnaby Joyce about a moment of truth for the MPs who are propping up Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. And let me start with just that, because I have a message to the Liberal MPs who will tomorrow have a party meeting in Canberra to get a lecture from Malcolm Turnbull. Why don't you guys finally give him the lecture? Why don't you finally get the courage to make a stand against your own Prime Minister and his global warming idiocy, and do it before he leads you over a cliff? You all saw a news poll today, the 38th in a row, stretching back almost 2 years now, where you Liberals have been behind Labor. And you saw that big drop in Turnbull's popularity in this poll. Whatever you are selling, the public's sure not buying. And one thing they're not buying is your plan for our electricity, with our bills going through the roof. Now, tomorrow, Turnbull and his ministers will sit you down and tell you why you should support his national energy guarantee. But you have to tell him now, no, enough with this con. Turnbull pretends this is a scheme to cut electricity prices, but you know it is in fact another global warming scheme to cut emissions instead. And that is why former Liberal Prime Minister Tony Abbott stepped up his opposition to it today.
I certainly don't accept that there is overwhelming support, as the Prime Minister says. This is such an absolutely critical question for the future of the government. It's an absolutely critical question for the future of our economy and our country. It would just be appalling if this were to be waved through tomorrow.
Now, you may say, you Liberal MPs, that's just that Abbott again, but who out there is buying Turnbull's spin? I bet you 1 in 1,000 of the voters in your electorates, they wouldn't even understand. At most, 1 in 1,000 would understand. And if they did, they'd think, wait a minute, yeah, it is a con. Yeah, because they would know this is a scheme that has targets for cutting emissions, but none for cutting prices. And even if they knew, it would, or thought, heaven forfend, does anyone think it? Even if they thought, oh yeah, maybe it will cut prices, it's not going to do it this side of the election, is it? You'd just be telling voters to trust you. But why should they? They know that under you and Labor both, that electricity prices have gone up and up and up, except for when Tony Abbott acts the carbon tax. But enough of your self-interest. Now, let's talk about the national interest. Ask yourselves, you Liberal MPs, why are you pushing a scheme to cut emissions when even Chief Scientist Alan Finkel is a global warming believer? He admits, even he does, that if you cut even all of Australia's emissions, every factory, every car, put a cork in every cow, that 1.3% we make up of the world's total emissions, you still would not cut the temperature because we are too small.
If we reduce the world's carbon emissions by 1.3%, what impact would that have on the changing climate of the world?
Virtually nothing.
So why, you Liberal MPs, is your neg and your Paris Agreement forcing us all to do something so utterly useless? And don't let Turnbull tell you, oh, look, alone we can't do anything, but together we're setting an example for the rest of the world. Together we can change the climate, because that, you know, is bull. First, there has actually been next to no warming this century. Second, most of the world isn't following our example at all. This Paris Agreement to cut emissions, 2 of the top 3 emitters in the world, China, India, are actually allowed under this agreement to increase their emissions up to double. And the United States, the third of the trio, it's walked out. And even if every single country did cut their emissions as promised under this agreement, and most are in fact not doing that, the temperature still will barely change. Professor Bjorn Lomborg estimated what difference this Paris Agreement would make. Just 0.05 of 1 degree. 0.05 of 1 degree over the century, nothing. All pain, no gain. So how do you, Liberal MPs, then explain to voters why you push global warming schemes that have helped to meanwhile close 9 coal-fired power stations in 6 years, making our power prices jump? How do you go and explain to pensioners in your electorates who can't afford now to even heat their homes in winter? How do you explain to them, hey, listen, your useless sacrifice, you're shivering in the bed, it's worth it? Now, ministers tell me, yeah, but we need this compromise, this neg, to give investors the certainty that they need to invest again in more power stations. And then it will be sweet. But excuse me, where is the certainty in a neg that will actually make it easier for the next Labor government to cut emissions even more? 50%. The Green allies say, hey, let's make it 100%. Where's the certainty? You Liberals. I bet almost every single one of you Liberal MPs knows that this is madness. So why are you going along with it? Is it because most of the media, journalists often as young as your kids, they like global warming schemes? Well, please grow a pair. Tell them why they can't have it. Others of you tell me, oh, well, look, we can't scrap this neg because it would undermine Turnbull's leadership. But look at the polls, guys. It's Malcolm Turnbull who's undermining you. Change course, change policy. And if Malcolm Turnbull can't sell the kind of new policy you Liberals need, cutting electricity prices, not cutting emissions, then find yourself a new leader who can.